Rents are skyrocketing across the country, and one writer believes we should blame politicians, not landlords, for skyrocketing rents. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's an opinion piece, and it's coming from a writer who's talking about the fact that in New York City, rents have skyrocketed, okay? And a lot of people out there right now, they're blaming landlords. They say that, hey, we're the greedy ones. We're the reason that all the rents are going up, and they don't seem to understand that, hey, our country, our economy, it is in a very odd place right now, okay? They've been pumping money into the economy for the last 2 years, and not just inflation, but we have supply issues when it comes to housing and affordable housing. And guess what? Rents are just shooting up into the air. People are trying to move back into New York after leaving during the pandemic. So it's made it basically a seller's market right now. The landlords are making a lot of money, and they have to jump in there and raise rents because right now they are able to still make money. And going into the future, if they have to fall under some sort of rent control or something, they are going to lose money if they don't have the highest rents possible. So I don't blame landlords for trying to charge the highest rents right now that they can get. Okay, so this is an interesting topic. I always think a lot about affordable housing, and this can be extended throughout the entire country. Don't think that this article is just about New York, okay? What this really has to do with is government bureaucracy, which is causing the cost of housing to go up. Okay, that's the same problem throughout the entire country, including here in the Midwest, in the West Coast, everywhere you go. Now, New York obviously is one of the worst. You'll see the effects worst right there because they are the center of the real estate world. They have one of the largest markets, and trends, they happen there faster than they happen anywhere else in the country. So that's why I like to always read these articles out of New York, because it shows what's going to eventually come here. It might take a few years, but that same problem will come here where I live and where I invest. Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think, okay? Do you think that the real problem of affordable housing and high housing costs and high rents is because of politicians or because of landlords? I know, my audience, what they're going to say to this, but I'm just curious. I know some tenants and some tenants' rights people watch my videos too, oddly enough, and, they should get their opinions out there too. If you blame landlords and politicians, go ahead, but, you already know what I think, okay? So this article is coming from the New York Post, and it says, blame politicians, not landlords, for skyrocketing New York City rents. All right, let's get into it. It's tempting to blame greedy landlords for skyrocketing rents in Manhattan. The median price of a one-bedroom apartment is up 25%, and a two-bedroom 27% from last year, with some tenants telling the Post of even higher hikes. One West Village studio is going from $2,696 to $3,950. Wow, those numbers are insane, okay? A freaking studio, but I'm guessing this West Village area, I'm not 100% on top of all the neighborhoods, but I'm pretty sure that must be a very popular area if people are paying nearly $4,000 a month to stay in a studio apartment there, okay? I can tell you right now that my 4,200 square foot 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom house with a 3-car garage on a lake here in Omaha, my mortgage payment is only $3,000 a month. So when I read that a studio apartment over here is nearly $4,000 a month, that blows my mind. Okay, this is a lot of money. This is a popular area. But those who see this as price gouging that should be illegal overlook a crucial fact. Many such increases are already illegal, and that's actually the heart of the problem. Rent regulation affects 960,000 of the city's 3 million housing units. Rents on these apartments are not increasing this year at all, thanks to the city's Rent Guidelines Board. A good deal for the current occupants, to be sure, but these price controls distort the overall market and lead to eye-popping rent increases on the few non-regulated units that remain. Here's why. And he starts going into exactly why rent control, basically causes the cost of the unregulated units to go up. And, this is one of my big arguments against rent control. So every time they implement rent control, they always exclude a certain amount of the housing stock. And it's usually the newer housing stock, so that they can still encourage people to develop. But what that means is the new housing stock has just insanely high rents. And the old housing stock that falls under rent control, well, it's either getting torn down. Basically, the number of units in the old housing stock is always decreasing because nobody wants to have a unit that is under rent control. And at the same time, the people who live in those rent controlled units never want to leave them because they got such a great deal. So this creates a huge supply demand issue, which causes prices to skyrocket. But let me see if he explains it a little better than I can. The lucky occupants of rent-stabilized units, surprisingly, tend to stay put once they've effectively hit the housing lottery. That helps explain why Gotham, once known for welcoming ambitious newcomers, has the lowest housing turnover of America's 10 largest cities. I call this the frozen city phenomenon. Regardless of their capacity to pay a higher rent, households protect their good, rent-regulated deals even if they no longer need the space. Think of the boomer couples on Central Park West with empty bedrooms. It's not a real housing market. It's a variation on musical chairs. Those left standing when the rent-stabilized vacancies are filled must enter the scrum for vacant, market-rate, non-regulated units. It should surprise no one that as housing demand rebounds, a good thing, asking tenants will rise for those units. It's what housing scholar Peter Salins has rightly termed scarcity by design. Yeah, they create the problem of high rents with rent control, okay? Basically, rent control causes the housing costs to be higher than they naturally would be because they created scarcity, okay? It's insane to think about it. Now, you think to yourself, oh, rents in New York are so high. Well, yes, they are high. It's a very, very popular place. But the question really is, would they be higher with rent control or would they be higher without rent control, right? And my personal opinion is that rent control creates artificial high prices in all of the unregulated units so that basically a small minority of the population can have the benefit of cheap rent. So you have the 960,000 out of the 3 million units. So basically 1/3 of the units the people who live in them, they get cheap rent. And then the other 2/3 who live in unregulated units, they get screwed over with super high rent. So those 2/3 of people are basically subsidizing the rent for all the 1/3 who get their cheap rent. So yeah, the overall benefit is only for the small tiny population of people, and in a lot of cases those people don't actually even need rent regulated units because there's no income requirement on them. So you could be a doctor making $1 million a year and get to live in a rent regulated unit just as easily as a family that's struggling working retail. Okay, that's how ridiculous the whole situation is. Oh man. If there's any good news in all this, it's the possibility the 2019 legislation has gone so far as to be unconstitutional. That's the contention of the Rent Stabilization Association, which is challenging the law in court. In the case heard last week by the U.S. Court of Appeals and likely headed to the Supreme Court, the RSA highlights the fact that the new law essentially requires that landlords renew an expiring lease even when a tenant has passed the apartment on to someone else, such as a younger family member. This, it says, creates an unending line of strangers to whom an owner must rent by law. And of course, it limits turnover, the heart of the city's problem. Yeah, you shouldn't be able to pass on your lease to whoever the heck you want, okay? The lease is between the person who signed the lease and the landlord, and that's it, okay? And when the term of that lease is over, then it's over, okay? The landlord shouldn't have to renew it, not in my opinion. And that should be the end of it. But that's not the way that it's set up in New York. And that's why it creates, like they said, basically a line of strangers that the landlord must rent to by law, and it basically never makes it so that rent control could never end on the units. The tenants are protected forever from ever being evicted, and they get cheap rent on the backs of the landlords forever. Okay, that's insane. Okay, all this stuff is insane. I don't believe in rent control. I never did. I'm glad that they're fighting this in court. I'm glad that it might go to the Supreme Court, and I hope it does, because this could be the end of rent control throughout the country if this sort of law is, deemed as unconstitutional and going against person's basic property rights. Okay, so interesting article here. I'm not going to finish it, but you get the gist of it. Okay, I blame politicians, their ridiculous policies that they put in place for all of this nonsense with rents going up. And this goes throughout the entire country, even in places where rent control doesn't exist. Okay, the more protections that you give a tenant, the more anti-landlord stuff you do in there to try to punish one or two bad players, the other 99% of landlords who are good landlords, we're the ones who truly suffer, and that causes rents to go up.